So I was supposed to do this yesterday, but unfortunately, yesterday I actually went hiking. I actually went to Big Sur National Park. Well, actually, it's not a national park, but it is a place down near the central part of California. And I actually chose this specific day to go to that place yesterday, mainly because since it's international friendly kind of weekend, we usually don't get any league games. I mean, we did get three this week in MLS, but all of them happened on Saturday. So yeah, I think that it is one of the rare times that I actually don't have any kind of soccer to watch, and also there's no any non-league game going on my area, so I can't do any sports hop during that time. So that's why I decided to go hiking, and unfortunately, because I got back so late last night and got so tired from the hiking, I couldn't do it yesterday, and now I am going to be doing it now, which is actually around the same time that I got back yesterday. So unfortunately, this video is probably going to be a late upload, but I'm pretty sure you guys are pretty used to my late upload in terms of video I upload overnight and available in early morning. But hopefully that won't happen, and I'm gonna try to keep this short. There are 3 games to talk about, so you would think that it is gonna be short, but there's also 2 other things that we got also talk about, which is the midweek game, the only midweek game this week in MLS, which involved DC United versus Minnesota, which I will mention it after the DC United versus NYCFC review. And then I have to talk about USA versus Brazil. Gonna give my thoughts about that game. I'm not gonna completely summarize and do a full review on that game. And then I'll also do a preview of USA versus Mexico, which actually happens tomorrow. And I will do a full review of that game tomorrow. I will watch the full game tomorrow. I actually didn't really watch the full game between USA versus Brazil. I think I watched the entire second half. The first half, I just looked at the highlights of it. But either way, let's get into these 3 games before we get into that review of USA versus Brazil. And we start off with NYCFC drawing 1-1 against DC United. The only 2 goals in this game. Only goal for NYCFC, David Villa with his 11. Bourbon with his goal, second, and scoring in the 58th minute. And by the way, before I mention a little bit more about what happened in this game, I'm going to leave a link in the description below of one of my friends called Andy, and he is actually also a ground hopper. He actually went to this game, and he actually did a vlog of this game, so I'll make sure I'll leave a link in the description below, and I'll make sure you guys check out that video. It's an awesome kind of video, and also support his channel too. But in terms of this match overall, NYCFC should have won this. I mean, NYCFC were absolutely dominating this game. DC United was pretty much parking the bus in this game. They were hoping to try to get something out of this, which they did. They got a point out of this, although you could argue that maybe in some way they'll be disappointed not to get all 3 in this game, considering the fact that the goal that they did concede happened in the 86th minute. But then again, it just, when you look at what NYCFC did this game, especially what they did in the second half, it was almost inevitable that NYCFC was going to find a way to break through that door of DC United. And, for DC United, I know a lot of people talk about how ever since Rooney, of course, come to DC United and how he has completely transitioned this team and completely make this team look like the best team in the league ever since the All-Star break. But a lot of people haven't mentioned Bill Hamid and his contribution in terms of this DC United team. I mean, it's hard to believe, but Bill Hamid, who was the DC United goalkeeper a couple of years ago before he went to that failed move to Denmark, and then now he's back with DC United. And when you look at his performance in these last couple of games, yeah, it is absolutely amazing. And in many ways, you can kind of argue that he probably made even a bigger impact than what Wayne Rooney has done in these last couple of games, making big saves after big save after big save. And in this game, it was no different. I mean, he made a couple of very decent saves. And I really think that if DC United would have had David Ousted in this game, and this is no disrespect to David Ousted, but if they had David Ousted in this game, they would have lost this one. I mean, some of the save that Hamid made was just unreal, and it also kind of made me think that maybe the US might be looking at Bill Hamid again and maybe call him back up as the goalkeeper of the US men's national team, because he has just been amazing. He is absolutely in form, and he looked as good as he was when he was with DC United a couple of years ago. But unfortunately, he did concede that goal by David Villa, which, to be fair, he actually almost saved that. I mean, it was basically a free kick that, in classic David Villa fashion, puts it into the top right. And the fact that Hamid actually got a hand to that is just quite amazing. But unfortunately, despite getting a hand to that, he just couldn't palm that one away. And that one, of course, ended into the back of the net. And, like I said, I think DC United, yes, you're disappointed that you didn't get all 3 points in this game. But at the end of the day, getting a point on the road against NYCFC is not the worst thing. And keep in mind, now that they are 5 points back of Montreal, they still technically control their own destiny in terms of them if they play even game with any other team. Which means that they have 2 games in hand of Montreal, and they have a 5-point gap to make. And if they win those 2 games in hand, then they are going to be in the playoffs. So if Montreal does not have any games anymore, and DC United has 2 more games in hand, if DC win those 2 games, then they would be ahead of Montreal. So, yeah, I mean, for DC United, obviously, like I said, this is certainly a good result, but at the same time, they shouldn't celebrate this good result because they do have that midweek game against Minnesota, and this is where I'm going to bring into the preview of that game. And, the good news for DC United coming into that game is that they're going to get Paul Arriola back. Arriola, of course, got scratched off of the U.S. men's national team roster in that USA versus Mexico game, which is understandable considering the fact that he was absolutely dreadful against Brazil, and he was easily the worst player out there in that US versus Brazil matchup. But the good news is they do get him back, and Arriola is certainly an important piece, especially on the attack for this DC United team. And knowing that DC United is still pretty short-handed with most of the guys that were on international break in this game, they will also be on international break for the very next one. So, that game against Minnesota, that has to be a must-win game for DC United. I mean, you would think that should be a winnable game, considering the fact that Minnesota is not doing very well this season, and especially on the road too. And if they lose to Minnesota, then yeah, that creates a little bit of a problem. Although one thing I will also say about that Minnesota matchup for DC United is that could potentially be a trap game too. Because keep in mind, after this Minnesota game, DC stays at home at Audi Field and they play on Sunday, but they play against the Red Bulls. And, for DC, they need to make sure that they don't just completely shift their focus in that Red Bulls game, and that they don't forget that they actually do have a midweek game and they have to first take care of business against Minnesota. And usually when you face a team just 2 games away and you have like a game between, yeah, that obviously is going to be a trap game. So I really think that is kind of a trap game for DC United when they play against Minnesota. But then again, I expect DC to win that one if they want to really push for the playoffs this season and convince us that they are definitely going to make the playoffs. But yeah, moving on into the next 2 match, and the next 2 match, I'm not even going to mention it very kind of extensively because it was kind of what I expected. The Sporting KC versus Orlando City game, I thought this game was going to be kind of a low-scoring game, considering the fact that both team doesn't really have a lot of good attack. I mean, Orlando City has good attack, but lately it has kind of been a little bit stuttering, while Sporting KC missing three guys in their heart and soul of the attack. Diego Rubio, Johnny Russo, and also Daniel Shaarawy not in this game for Sporting KC. So those are the three weapons that they heavily rely on attack. And, you know, I thought this was a game that they just have to grind it out and get all 3 points. And that is exactly what they did, with Felipe Gutierrez scoring the goal for them. It's actually his first goal since returning from that sports hernia injury, which, you know, or sports hernia surgery. But that certainly is a very kind of impressive feat for him, and certainly that has to give him a lot of confidence that he is back scoring goals again. Because remember, earlier in the season, Felipe Gutierrez, he was scoring goals for fun out there, and this was a guy that nobody thought that this was the guy that Sporting KC is going to rely on scoring goals. But now that he's back, he is looking good again and looking in form again. And, you know, if you have an informed Felipe Gutierrez alongside with those three attackers that I mentioned that they miss in the international duty, then this Sporting KC team is going to be very dangerous going forward and even in the playoffs. And as for Orlando City, well, there's not much I can say about you other than the fact that, yeah, first of all, this goal by Gutierrez, I forgot to mention that this should have been saved by Joe Bendik. I mean, Gutierrez, you know, he kind of hit that one from outside the 18. He didn't really hit it very strongly, and for some reason, Joe Bendik he didn't save it. Like, he got a hand to it, but he didn't save it. And you would think that if you have a better goalkeeper out there, that shot probably should have been saved. But, you know, for Orlando City, it's been a miserable season, and it's been kind of a deja vu season for Orlando City again, of how last season they were in a tough stretch for the second half of the season. Well, this time it kind of have come early, and one win in the last 17 games is definitely not an impressive resume, and certainly not a resume of them potentially actually making the playoffs. I mean, I don't think anybody in the world would still think Orlando City has a chance of making the playoffs. But meanwhile, moving on into the last game, Portland, of course, 2-0 victory over the Rapids. Again, it's a very kind of expected win for Portland. You know, everybody knew that they were going to beat Colorado, especially with the fact that the Rapids does not have Acosta in this game. Ibu BC. I'm not quite sure did I pronounce that name right. I might have butchered it. Portland Timber fan, don't get angry at me if I butcher his name completely, but he scored his first ever goal this season. I think that's his first ever goal in MLS because he is starting for the first time this season. They didn't say on MLSsoccer.com that this was his first ever start. They just said that it was the first start of the season. So I'm guessing he probably had a start before, but I don't think that start he actually got a goal. So I'm just going to say that is his first ever goal in MLS. And then, of course, Diego Valeri scoring his 10th goal. He have now become, I think, the fourth player to score 10 goals while recording 10 assists in 4 seasons in MLS. And he did it 4 out of the 5 seasons in MLS. I mean, talking about one of the most competitive, or not competitive, but one of the most consistent and one of the most important player on a team you will ever see in any MLS team so far. I mean, Valeri is just the heart and soul of that Portland team, and once again this season he is having an impact kind of year. Although I will say that Valeri hasn't been as good as he was last season. I mean, last season he was having an absolute monster year with like 20 goals and 20 assists. It was just incredible. It was something we have never seen in MLS, but you know, 10 goals, 10 assists is not bad too, especially with a player that has been doing this almost every single year. But yeah, that of course is the review of this game. And now, of course, I'm gonna move myself here, and hopefully this thing does not fall. Just to make sure this thing does not fall. I'm gonna be moving here in the middle, and of course I will be talking about the U.S. men's national team versus Brazil. Of course, it's not on the board here, but yeah, in that game, the U.S. lost 2-0 against Brazil, and in many ways, it should have been a 1-0 loss for the U.S. because if you saw what happened in that second goal, which Neymar, of course, scored that second goal on a penalty, the only problem is that was never a penalty. I mean, I just don't understand. Like, I know Brazil is always known for being a diving cheat, and that they are a team known for a lot of diving kind of cheat kind of player. And the fact that they still decided to do it in a friendly match, and also I'm also kind of criticizing the ref in this game, which were also very bad in this game, and just as bad as all those pro kind of ref that we have in MLS. Like, how in the world do you still fall for those dive when you know that this is a team that has the history of trying to get an advantage and trying to dive for penalties, and yet you still decided to fall for it? And that is exactly what happened in, I think, the 41st minute of this game, when Fabinho basically just dived in the box. I mean, Miazga basically made absolutely no contact whatsoever of Fabinho. And for those of you that still think that he actually clipped Fabinho there, then you better watch that replay time and time again, or you're just trolling right now. There is no way that was a penalty, and if you ask anybody else in the world, they would definitely agree to me. No way that's a penalty. And if that incident happened in the World Cup, then that certainly would be overturned. I mean, the only reason why that wasn't overturned is because we didn't have VAR in friendlies, and, you know, I kind of understand why they don't have VAR in friendlies, mainly because, you know, it's a friendly. It doesn't really matter at the end of the day. But at the same time, if that would have happened in a game that definitely have VAR, then that's definitely going to be overturned. But overall, besides the penalty controversy in this game, you know, I didn't think the U.S. played that badly in this game. I mean, I'm pretty sure when you look at the stats, it doesn't really back up my claim whatsoever, because Brazil were absolutely dominating this game. I mean, this was basically Brazil versus USA under 23. I mean, when you look at the starting 11 for that Brazilian side, Casemiro, Neymar, Fabinho, Coutinho, Firmino, all those guys, and even Thiago Silva and Alisson, all those guys were in the starting 11, and those were the guys that were in that World Cup with Brazil in the World Cup in Russia. And you know, you knew that US was not gonna win this one when you saw that lineup. I mean, this game was pretty much over when Brazil decided to go with their best starting 11, and that the US were basically playing a U23, and as you expected, you know, we lost this one. Although one thing I will say is that we definitely had a couple of chances of potentially scoring the goal, and I think the first thing I'm gonna get to is the negative part about this game, and that is what exactly is the negative part of this game, is that we just cannot finish in that game. Like, we have no end product whatsoever in that game. I mean, I thought our midfield in terms of creating chances in this game was pretty good, but at the end of the day, no matter how many chances we create and no matter how we deliver through those set pieces, there was just no end product whatsoever. Nobody on this team could be clinical in front of goal and put that one into the back of the net. And that is probably the most frustrating part about this game, because, you know, at the end of the day, it doesn't matter if you are creating some good chances or you do very well delivering the ball in on a set piece. If you just don't put the ball into the back of the net, then those things doesn't really matter whatsoever. And I hope, maybe what I'm thinking is that maybe if Pulisic is back in this starting 11, he can potentially be the one that, of course, score the goals, which, by the way, Pulisic wasn't in this game because he currently injured with Dortmund. But at the same time, I don't think Pulisic is going to be that guy that's going to do the same thing too, because, Pulisic is not a player that is known for goal scoring, especially when he is at Dortmund. I mean, he's not more known for setting up goals and stuff like that, and setting up kind of like a promising attack. He's not gonna score you a bunch of goals. So then you now have to look at who else is gonna deliver these goals. I mean, Clint Dempsey is no longer with this team. He just retired from the U.S. men's national team, and the only guy that I can legitimately think that could be the one that delivered those goals for us is gonna be Josie Altidore. And saying that really scares me, because you know what happened to Josie Altidore in that World Cup qualifying against Trinidad and Tobago, and you know what happened last year when he was with the U.S. men's national team. He was utterly shit in that game. I mean, I hope potentially we might find a goal scorer. I mean, I know Tim Way probably is a guy that we could potentially be the one that could be like the Clint Dempsey and the Landon Donovan kind of type of player that score those goals. But then again, Tim Way, he's only like 17 years old, and if you ask him to do all the goal scoring and ask him to put on that responsibility of scoring goals in crucial situation at this part of the age, that is just absolutely insane. So I hope maybe we might potentially figure that kind of situation out. But other than that, I thought our midfield was absolutely amazing in this game, and our defense was absolutely rock solid in this game. I mean, I think probably besides the first 10 minutes when we did concede that goal to Roberto Firmino in the 11th minute, our defense was absolutely rock solid. John Brooks and Matt Miazga, this could be a partnership that we might be seeing in 4 years in the World Cup. And, what's interesting about that is that I think it was just 2 years ago when I was still doing my Chelsea preview and review video, and I was doing a Chelsea review video for this game against Aston Villa, which we won 4-0 in this game. And I think Matt Miazga started in that game, and I think that was only appearance that he ever had in a Chelsea shirt, and probably will be the only time he will be appear for Chelsea. But I said that, when I look at this kid, I thought, hey, this is definitely a very kind of talented kind of kid, and, he's US. I'm guessing that he not only has a big future for Chelsea, but maybe he also could potentially have a future in the U.S. men's national team, and that he could potentially be the guy that will be our star center back in the U.S. men's national team. Fast forward 2 years later, even though technically I didn't get it right with the Chelsea prediction, look what happened. He is now kind of like the star man for this U.S. men's national team in that center back role. Well, actually, technically, not yet, but I'm thinking that in the future, he probably will be that star man in the center back row. And, alongside, of course, with John Brooks, who also had a very decent game. But I really think if I had to pick a man of the match in that game, it has to be Miazga. I mean, the amount of time that he either stopped Brazil from going on the counterattack, and the amount of time that he is able to deal with crosses. It felt like every time when Brazil crossed in that second half, and they cross a lot, believe it or not, he is always the first one to get that ball out of the box and get that ball out of safety. And, if he can continue to do that throughout his time with the U.S., then we could definitely have one of the best center back that we have ever seen wearing this U.S. men's national team shirt. And, I think maybe now I'm kind of like overhyping the kid a little bit, but I generally think that he is definitely very decent. I mean, he had a decent run in the Gold Cup last year too, and now he is doing it in the big stage, and he's doing it against one of the best team in the world and stopping some of the best player in the world right now. I mean, it's not every day an 18-year-old, or well, I don't think he's 18 anymore. I actually don't know exactly how old he is. I think he is 21 or something like that. But it's not every day a 21-year-old will wakes up and you have to defend against Neymar and Firmino. Yeah, that it's not every day that you get to say that, and it's also not every day that you get to say it that you did a magnificent job to stopping both of those guys and put them in your back pocket for majority part of this game. But you know, from the game and from the game between the U.S. and Brazil, and you know, kind of talking about the review, I kind of also want to like move forward and talk about the preview between the U.S. and Mexico, and you know, this is definitely, I think, could be one of the breaking point game for the U.S. men's national team, and I think this could be potentially a game that really shows how good this youth side is, because I think in that Brazil game, it doesn't, you know, we did had some very talented we definitely had a couple of good players that performed very well in that game, but at the same time, when you're playing against Brazil, who is like a mile ahead of where we are right now, it doesn't really kind of tells you are they really kind of decent or not. And at times, they didn't really look that decent too. But now, when you play against Mexico, and keep in mind, this is a Mexican team that I've heard that they're gonna bring in their youthful side, and they're gonna pretty much do the same thing that the U.S. is doing. So basically, in many ways, this is like U.S. under 23 versus Mexico under 23 in this game, and they are also going to put their best kind of youngster and kind of the next generation kind of guy into this game, and it is going to be very fascinated to see how will this kind of play out. And you know, it's very important that we actually do well in this game, because who knows, maybe in 4 or 5 years when we do play against Mexico in the World Cup, potentially, we could be potentially seeing the same guy that are playing in this game that is going to be happening tomorrow. And the other thing that I'm also thinking that this is a game that, you know, I wouldn't say this is a must-win game for the U.S. because, you know, in a friendly, saying a must-win is just absolutely ridiculous, since friendly usually means nothing. But I really think this is a game that I kind of want the U.S. to win, not just because of the rivalry standpoint, but it's because Mexico, they're kind of like entering this early transitional phase where they just recently sacked Juan Carlos Osorio. Well, actually, they didn't sack him. He actually left the team and stepped down in the team, and that they don't really have a manager right now. They have an interim manager right now, and in the last game against Uruguay, they got absolutely destroyed against Uruguay. They got smoked 4-1 in that game, and certainly their confidence coming into this game is definitely not as high as the U.S. losing 2-0 against Brazil. So I think this is a big opportunity for this team to really step up and potentially get a win. And I really think if we do get a win in this game, it will really boost the confidence of these youngsters. Because like the old saying, nothing boosts a player confidence than actually getting a win. And if this team can get a win, they will have a lot of confidence heading into next month friendly, which, you know, next month friendly is not going to get any easier for us. I believe we have Colombia, Peru, and also England next. And that England game, yeah, that's going to be an interesting kind of game. Two of the teams that I actually root for going at each other. You know, usually when that happens, I usually support USA more than what England is. But yeah, I mean, this is definitely not a very easy kind of stretch in terms of those friendly games. And you might say that it's just kind of like friendlies and they don't really matter. Yeah, in a time where the U.S. are kind of in a rebuilding stage and we bring so many youngsters through the team, and that this could potentially be the future for our national team and how we will do in 4 years in Qatar, you better believe that these kind of games are very important, and it's kind of like a first kind of trial to see how good exactly these youngsters are and how they could definitely be much better than the previous iteration of what the U.S. men's national team is. But, either way, I'm pretty excited about this game, and like I said, I will do a review of that game. I'll do a full review of that game tomorrow after I finish watching the match. But yeah, either way, guys, I hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you do, make sure you guys leave a like, smash that subscribe button. Oh, wait, one more thing I forgot. Ziggy Schmidt is officially out as the manager of the LA Galaxy. He actually stepped down for the Galaxy today, which means that you know who's gonna be now in charge of the Galaxy. Yep, you guessed it, it's Dominic Kintner. And to be honest, I actually want Dominic Kintner to stay for the Galaxy for next season, because that would be very interesting in that Cali Clasico. I mean, now that not only I want nothing but a win for the Quakes over the Galaxy, but it will also, besides hang a big L on Zlatan's face, but it will also be to my biggest satisfaction that we can even hold a bigger L on Dominic Kintner and just show them why we decided to let them go and why it was a great idea that we let them go and we hated you in the first place. So yeah, I hope, Dom, you stay at the Galaxy until next season so we can of course face you and also beat you. But yeah, either way, guys, I hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you do, make sure you guys leave a like, smash that subscribe button, and yeah, I will see you guys next time.